Tom, Sugar Ray, Pamunjom, Brando, the King and I, and the Catcher in the Rye. Eisenhower vaccine, England's got a new queen. Marciano, Liberace, Satayana, goodbye. We didn't start the fire. It was always burning since the world's been turning. We didn't start the fire. No, we didn't light it, but we tried to find it. Welcome to the show, Jeff. Welcome to the Greatness Machine, my friend. You got a little singing.
Thanks for having me. Nice karaoke.
First of all, I always pick songs that remind me of what we're going to talk about. We're talking about some crazy stuff that's happening in the world. So I thought we didn't start the fire. We're just living through it. Well, before we get that, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and boy, do we have a special guest today in Jeff Booth. I'm so pumped to have you here, my friend. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, guys, the format of the show is quite simple. We are the Greatness Machine, and we're all about bringing people who are living their passions to create greatness in the world. And Jeff is neither short of nor passion nor greatness. So we have a lot of cool things we're going to be talking about, and I'll get into his bio in just a second. But before we go there, a couple of things about live streaming. We are live. Start a watch party. Ask us questions. And I have my team on standby. They're going to be shooting messages over to us as you ask them. Last but not least, be inquisitive. The whole purpose of doing live streaming is so that we have experts who are really working on some cool things and giving access to you all so that you can ask those questions. But like I said, we have a very special guest. A couple weeks ago, when we first started really ramping up the Greatness Machine, an old forum mate of mine, Stephen Jagger, was on. And when we were up at the end of the show, we were talking about the state of the world. And he's like, oh, you got to meet my co-founder, Jeff. And he just wrote this book. And because my book's coming out in 3 weeks. And he's like, you got to talk to him. And it was really more about just the fact that you wrote a book. And then I went and saw what the book was about. And I was like, yeah, it's great that you wrote a book, man. But I actually want to talk about the book that you wrote, not about the process of writing the book. So if you don't mind, I write a little bit of my own bios. Do you mind if I kind of do my thing?
Yeah, you go. Yeah.
So I always start, it's funny, as entrepreneurs, we'll start off with our achievements, like I've done this great business, I'm an entrepreneur. But I read through yours and I was like, man, the biggest thing you did is you're a proud family man. And I thought that was really cool. And so I always start with that. In my forums, I used to do business high, business low, personal high, personal low, family high, family low. I stopped that. Now I do family high, family low first, because I think what we say and when we say matters. So proud family man, serial entrepreneur. And we're talking in the highest ways possible. The businesses you've built are incredible. Founder, strategic advisor, and tech leader. Jeff is also the author of the new book, The Price of Tomorrow: Why Deflation is the Key to an Abundant Future. So we're going to be talking about the book because I am super intrigued by this. And I got the pleasure of hearing you on another show talk about this. And I was like, I got to meet this guy. This is really, really, really pertinent, and it's really important. And with what's going on in the world right now, the world needs to hear more about this. So thank you for being on the show, Jeff. This is awesome.
Thanks. By the way, just what you started with, Proud Family Man, or how we show up in the world, and you know this from EO or YPO, you go through a lot of this and self-learning to be able to get deeper and kind of the things that really matter. Funny enough that the book is actually all an outcome of that. So where you start, what's important in your life really matters. So anyways, it's interesting that you started with that. I totally agree.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's taken me a long time to learn it. I mean, even my actions right now, launching the book, I'm living in my office, and I'm not proud of that, but I squeeze in the time with the family because I know it's important. And I appreciate you saying that as well. So I like connecting on that level. Let's talk about the book though. And well, before we go to the book, many of the audience are going to know who you are because you're a very successful entrepreneur. You built iconic businesses, and so would you mind giving a little bit of background for those that maybe don't know who you are, what your background professionally, even personally, if you want to add that, and just kind of frame the conversation with that, and then we can jump into the book.
Many people would know me from starting Build Direct, and Build Direct grew to over $500 million in market cap, and had a chance to become the Amazon of building supplies. It was doubling every year in sales. we took what we realized in that business is it couldn't do it under the old format, and I had to break it. So I had to break it and then come out the other side. That business, once you have shareholders in a business and everything else, that's really hard to do. It's easy to pivot a business at $10 million in sales, $20 million in sales. It's very difficult to pivot a business completely when you have 350 people and you're doing material revenues. So that did not end well. It's still going and everything else, but it doesn't look like the same company. But the learning across that adventure was probably more instrumental than anything else. Myself learning what happened to me, because you have to change as a CEO. That whole, you're a startup in your living room, and then you take the entire path to a company like that, and you learn a lot. The world's moving, you're moving, your team's moving. And so it just, the whole adventure was extraordinary. Yeah, loved it. And that same thing has just played kind of throughout my life in that business. The only reason I got into that business is I was frustrated. I was a builder before that.
Right. And
I was frustrated because I couldn't deliver a home on time for the customer because the flooring didn't arrive on time. Mm-hmm. And so I had to put the customer up in a hotel and the furniture in storage, and I was mad. And I said, it shouldn't look like this, and said, I'm going to recreate it different. So I've always been an entrepreneur, seeing patterns. Why does this exist this way? Questioning deeper questions. Why does this exist this way? And it shouldn't. And then trying to fix that problem. That's what an entrepreneur does.
Right. So you had the experience, and like I said before the show, I said I went and looked you up after Stephen made the introduction, and he didn't either. He said the name of your company, or when I looked at you up, I saw the name, and I'm like, that sounds so familiar to me. I'm in mortgage. I was in mortgage servicing, mortgage origination, which is, it's like a cousin of the builder business, and the fact that we're doing the financing side of it. But there would be no real, I was never really doing a lot of business direct with any type of your company. But when I said that name sounds so familiar, and I realized it's like, wow, there's a whole case study on you guys in a book that I've read 10 times. Vern Harnish's Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, I believe, in Scaling Up. And so I saw that and I was like, oh, like that name sounds so familiar. I'm like, now I know why. I've read the name. That's a really important book. I was a scaling up company. I know you were a scaling up company. And my book is actually born. My book, The Core Value Equation, is born out of scaling up. I don't know if, so that's where this is me kind of having frustration around this thing as an entrepreneur around how do you take this asset of core values and make it come to life. So you did this great thing in business. You have the heart and mind of an entrepreneur, and now you're in this new mountain, and you're climbing the new mountain. And this book, where was this book born out of in that? Because obviously the building business is very different than having a really big and thoughtful hypothesis around something that goes counter to probably every central bank in the world's ideology on what needs to happen.
And most people's ideology.
Right.
So at first, and again, an entrepreneur mindset is kind of looking at what's broken and trying to get to first principles and then constructing a way forward. Right. That's really what an entrepreneur does. And I wasn't as much a building entrepreneur as I was an entrepreneur, a technology entrepreneur. And so if you understand what's happening in technology, and today, I think I'm co-founder of 6 different companies and chairman of many different companies. So boards of lots of different companies, and at the front seat of so Build Direct 2, at the front seat of technology, I'm in all of the conversations with Google, Amazon, all of the early on, to see what they became, right? And all so why did they look like that? What happened and everything else? So I still read 50 books a year. I'm constantly quite inquisitive, curious about what's happening in the world. And what I saw, including all my companies, is technology is a crazy powerful force. And it's moving faster and faster and faster.
Right.
But the technology, what is the point of technology, right? There is not one technology founder that says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to create more jobs globally with technology. You use technology to increase efficiency.
Right.
Fair? And so that means technology is deflationary, right? It makes things cost less because you remove the labor component. So I'm sitting on top of all these companies, watching this happen, super excited for the companies and the value that I'm bringing to the world, right? And the companies that I'm involved in. And I want to clarify something. There is not one technology founder that I coach, help, board member of that doesn't really care about making the world a better place, right? I wouldn't join those companies if they didn't. They actually care about making the world a better place, and they're using technology to make things better for people.
Right.
But if you say what's happening in technology, that means all of those people, prices are wanting to come down radically,
Right.
because
Right.
technology is deflationary. That's a fact, and it's moving into every single industry. And so what that means is prices should be coming down everywhere, right?
Right.
And not only is technology deflationary, it's exponentially deflationary, right? So it doubles and it doubles and it doubles again. So, and I'm going to get into that in a second, but that technology is deflationary. It's moving into every industry. It means prices of everything should be coming down lower and lower and lower.
Okay.
And that's it. Personally, you would say, wow, that's not a bad thing, right? Because if prices fell, your iPhone today gives you tons of free stuff, cameras, everything else, search, everything else. It's a personal assistant, and the price keeps falling, right? So all of that stuff becomes free. But it's up against a world that we constructed, or central banks constructed, that is an inflationary policy. And that inflationary policy is trying to drive prices up at the same time they're coming down. But what that is doing is it's concentrating wealth into the asset owners and the technology monopolies at a faster rate, because there's no money printing in the world that is going to stop technological deflation in the end. So all of the second things we talk about, third things we talk about, the division in society, is actually because of this problem. And so when you hear Trump, when you hear Biden, when you hear all of these things, they're sitting on top of a broken system that will not work anymore. And on one side, so you either have socialism for the rich, which essentially all of this money printing that's happening, right? And what that money printing is designed to do is stop prices from falling, because if prices fell, banks would collapse, we would go into depression and everything else. So now there's so much debt in the world, so much printing in the world, that it just keeps on doubling and doubling, and it's doubling at the same rate as the technology is trying to drive things lower and lower in price. So, and I wrote the book because I looked at my children and the next generation coming up, and saying they won't live in the same world as far as opportunities and everything else. The world will look very divided, will look very different in their lifetimes because of what we're talking about. And nobody was putting their finger on it. Nobody was connecting the dots. You had these silos. So I didn't want to write a book. I didn't need to write a book. I wrote the book because of that, because ultimately your impact in the world matters.
So if you have, and I could agree with you more, but my question for you, and this is where I think I've always been like a very good numbers person, that just numbers are intuitive for me. And so I've kind of gotten, when I heard you make the statement you made in another talk you did, I was like, oh, bingo, that's it. Like, this is what I've been feeling, right? And my gut, I call it my jelly bean jar. My gut can guess the number of jelly beans in a jelly bean jar, like, really easily. So I'm like, oh, my gut's talking to me. That's what I'm seeing. This doesn't make sense. Why do we keep having I get that we have cheaper money and people are fighting for yield, and so they're buying more assets and they're paying up, and then they're, the cheaper money gets a better yield, and this is all about returns on investment to pay pension funds and blah 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 and all that stuff. But at the same time, to your point, and we can talk about in a second, when we go into Moore's law, this doubling the speed of technology, and I love the analogy, or it's a fact, not even an analogy, around what this looks like from a distance to perspective. But
you want me to go into that?
Yeah, go into that, because I have a really big question that has been eating at me since I saw your talk. So
Okay.
do you mind talking about what's going to happen?
Yeah. So all of the things right now that are happening are predicted in my book, right? The next steps are all predicted as well. My own portfolio has done extraordinary into this because of what I wrote about in the book. I don't say that as I'm proud of it. I don't want what's happening to happen, but I can also realize it's going to, no matter what I do. So we should talk about potential solutions afterwards, but let's first talk about what I just said. So Moore's law is an exponential pattern. And I've talked about this on stage, tens of thousands of people all over the world. And I use a piece of paper to demonstrate. And I fold the piece of paper once, I fold the piece of paper twice, I fold the piece of paper on itself 3 times, and I keep going. I fold about 5 times. And at that time, the piece of paper is about this thick. Then I ask the audience how thick would the piece of paper be at 50 folds? And over 90% of the people guess that. And very few times you get to the roof, and even fewer times you get to the moon. Well, that piece of paper would reach to the sun. And it blows people's minds. And I know a whole bunch of people on your live stream are currently going to Google to check that fact. It's true. And it'll go to the sun. But what it says, and if everybody got the answer, or 50% of people got the answer, it would say, oh, we understand exponential patterns, no problem, right? So we're likely to see what an exponential pattern and make the right choices. But because nobody gets that, unless you've heard it before, what it says is we're very bad at exponential patterns. We're terrible at it. Humanity is terrible at it. Not me, not you. Everybody that's listening now, they will say, oh, now I know the parlor trick, I'm smart at it, but they'll miss the next one. We're all bad at it. And that fact, Moore's law is an exponential pattern. We've had 33 doubles. So and just like technology doesn't make a difference in the early folds, in the later folds, you take the steep steps, you take the big steps. So 33 folds is the equivalent of Boston to Detroit, right? 34 doubles the last 50 years of progress. 35 coming 36 months later, 4 years later, is going to double that again. And so if you think you're not keeping up to what AI is doing today, where that is it going to impact self-driving cars, where it's going to impact all sorts of industries and do a better job, think about what's going to happen going forward, right? And recognize you cannot get that exponential double in your head. Think about what that means for technology going forward. And it also means that if technology is wanting to deflate prices like this, the only way to keep them stable or going up is to print money at that rate. So now let's look at the facts against that equation, right? That equation. In the last 20 years, there has been an additional $185 trillion of debt being created to drive $46 trillion of economic return globally. 185. So today before COVID, we had 250 trillion of debt, 185 trillion of it added over the last 20 years, right? To 250 trillion of debt to drive an $80 trillion global economy. Now the global economy is far smaller, and the global debt is way bigger than that. But it's all predicted, because if you have technology doing this to keep things, you're going to have to exponentially increase the debt. And because you cannot, and now go to the next step. If the debt is, if the debt itself, if you just put debt on, this from a mortgage bank, all you're doing is pulling demand forward.
Right.
So if the debt needs to be repaid, then the debt itself is disinflationary because you're pulling future demand, and that future demand has to be paid back in the future. So taxes must go up, which slows down business growth and drives more disinflation or deflation against what we've already talked about. So with that much debt in the world, will that debt ever be repaid?
I mean, my feelings are is like you have to have a massive, like, basically default.
So the debt's, that's exactly, but a default means a default means a global depression, right? And all the debt holders get wiped out, but the debt holders are the banks and the governments. And so think that looks like the 30s on steroids. So what the central bankers are trying to do, they caught themselves in this by printing against a structural change, and they're trying to get out of it by printing more and printing more, and trying to get out of it is not going. It's not going to work. Effectively, at some point, they're going to change the rules with MMT or something else. They're going to change the rules. Currencies are going to break. You're going to go into hyperinflation,
right, and
deflation on the other side. But all of those paths from where we are right now, and I don't like that. Those are factual. Doesn't make me celebrate them. Right?
No. They're scary, right? Like scary. Like it's a lot of anxiety around those when you see stuff like that.
A lot of pain is coming to society, and not just one society. Not you're in the U.S., I'm in Canada, not just one society. Every country in the world is in a similar position, all manipulating their currencies to try to gain trade advantage. So the future is unprecedented.
So how do you so I guess there's a couple things. How do you protect, against that? Because I look at that and I go, this is a runaway train. The only way I could see, if you want to fix it, you'd have to tax your way out of it temporarily, which, to your point, no one's going to be the popular guy that says, hey, we got to raise our taxes on everyone that's making over X by 80%. They did that in the Great Depression, I think. Or who was FDR did that, where they raised taxes like crazy against people that made a lot of money, right? So I looked at this. I pulled the American balance sheet up a few years ago because I think I had some of these concerns. I said, well, theoretically, you could just, like, every really wealthy big business, because these Western businesses are living on the infrastructure of Western countries, right? Theoretically, I could say it's 90% tax above X dollars. We're just going to start paying down our debt, right? I don't think they will do that because, to your point, it'll be very unpopular.
So let's go into that first. And so first, what is inflation? What is deflation? Inflation is only when goods and services go up relative to your money, right? That's all it is. So when governments say they want an inflationary target, if instead they said, we're trying to make your currency worthless, would it change your view on wanting inflation, right?
Yeah, of course.
So inflation, and then a derivative of that equation means some people win, some people lose. If you borrow today to pay back tomorrow, when the dollars are worth less, and you borrow to buy a house, you win, right? So the derivative of that is some people win, some people lose. On the other side of the coin, deflation. Goods and services cost less in relation to your money, right? A derivative of that is some people win, some people lose. If you're a saver, if you save money, it's worth more. You buy more, and over time. So now to compare those two things, you have a whole bunch of people. You're telling the government is telling people to save for a down payment, right? Save cash for a down payment for a house. Mm-hmm. At the same time, they're destroying the value of that cash, right?
Right.
Making it harder for those people to ever get in.
Right.
Now we have 2008 or now, and the government comes in and says, or just a policy all over the world, you have essentially negative interest rates or negative real interest rates everywhere,
Right.
And so what does that do to corporations? What does that do to the entire world? Let's use some of the airlines as examples, right? Would they save cash in that environment? The government has said, we're going to make your cash worthless, right?
Yeah.
If you save cash, we're going to penalize you, right? Because another airline that buys back their stock, using that cash to buy back their stock, wins because of the rules you set up.
Right.
So now, in a competitive environment, you've created the same thing you don't want to happen. You have a whole bunch of stress in this, or a whole bunch of weakness in the system, ever more weakness in the system, and then one blip, and the airline said, "I need cash because otherwise I have to lay off all my employees."
Right.
And so what you do, because of the same thing you created in the first place, is you give them government money,
Right.
and you enrich the same people who created the problem,
Right.
against everybody else that's happening. So no wonder in this sort of environment, it's no wonder you have these camps where politics is dividing further and further and further. You have a rise in socialism,
Right.
against because there's a whole bunch of people that are the entire system doesn't work anymore.
Right. So you have this situation where, to your point, it's socialism for the rich, where, and I said this example with what just happened with COVID. I said, they're kind of putting a rock in a hard place. If they say, nope, that's free market enterprise, you should have planned for the pandemic, too fucking bad, right? Like, and you just let a bunch of, well, if they do that, everyone goes out of business and you have probably a depression, right? If they don't do that, we have the problem we were talking about. And so you're kind of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because you haven't incentivized, to your point, savers, and you're only letting it be free market enterprise on the upside.
Totally. And so you have socialism for the rich, and then no wonder a response would be socialism for the poor. By the way, both of those systems, both that we're talking about, crony capitalism on one side, and socialism on this other side, will not work.
No.
Both, right? Been tested across history. Both won't work. They'll both break. We'll go through revolution and war to see that. But both of those won't work. But you can manipulate an entire populace by getting them to believe they work, and so both won't work.
So when you say we're at our 34th or 33rd, we're at the 33rd inning out of 50 innings, and every 18 months another inning comes and goes, right?
Yeah, and remember, it doesn't go to 50. It goes to 51, 52, 50. Right?
Oh, my bad.
yeah. But just the big steps, the world's going to look so different by the time it gets to 40. It's going to look so crazy different that people can't even comprehend what this looks like.
Well, and I come from the business of government lending, right? I was the 11th largest government lender in the United States for residential housing. And what I found was that, and this might just be one example, but this is, I think this is something where the government may try to go this direction, at least in the States, is you can regulate to slow it down, right? So like we have, and the mortgage industry is a good example, right? Like mortgage industry, there's so much red tape and regulation that technologists can't invade that market because they just stop it. They just say, well, no, we won't adopt those technologies. And so you have literally people doing stuff like you could get a loan much easier in the United States than you do today for a house, but there's tons of regulation that stops it.
Yeah, but if you just carry that forward, again, you have to get down to the root of the problem. The root of the problem isn't regulation. The root of the problem isn't all this. Yes, you could manipulate markets for a short time in that, but they will find a different way to. Right. There is no regulation. There is no edge case, thin thing, taxes or otherwise, that can solve this problem right now.
Right.
It's too big a problem.
Right. And I used to be a trader, and there used to be this saying, and probably still saying, is you don't want to stand in front of a moving train, right? And so in the markets, when the market's the moving train, like there's nothing you're going to do to stop it. So to your point, this is a moving train, and we don't want to stand in front of it. And people will, they are trying to do that by currency printing and by increasing the debt loads. Or we just went in the States here from what, 20 trillion to 30 trillion in debt. That's where we'll probably end up, right? And
you'll be way higher than that, because mathematically, what I'm talking about, you have to be way higher than that.
right.
And so you will be this year or shortly after that, but then it'll go, mathematically it'll go higher. Otherwise the economy is going to collapse. But when the economy collapses and debt to GDP, and now your GDP is less, all the debt goes offside, right? That's the problem. You cannot solve a debt problem with more debt.
Right. And so that's where I'm, by the way, that's why I'm stuck right now. Because I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, we had 22 trillion in GDP and now it just dropped to call it 17 this year. Our GDP dropped by 25%, 20%. It's a COVID issue, but we had to print 10 trillion in debt to stabilize everything. So now we're at 17 to call it 30. So just for easy math, we're at 2 times debt to GDP. For all
just government.
Just government.
Add corporate, add personal, you'd see how crazy the numbers are.
Right. So this is a problem. And this is where like Darius gets on the phone with his financial advisor who wants him to invest in the markets and all this stuff. And I'm like, I can't, I mean, I'm in all cash, dude. I went into all cash.
Okay. So now take this all cash thing. So you want moving train. Governments are forced to destroy their currencies.
Right.
So if you're in all cash, how did it look like if you were all in all cash in 2008 when they did the same thing? The value of your cash got destroyed. What can that cash buy today versus before? Because the Fed is the moving train, right? And eventually you're going to have hyperinflation.
Right.
If you have hyperinflation and you're in all cash, you're going to get destroyed.
Right. No, I sense that. But what's the solution?
Well, so those two forces, bigger than anybody else, are right now battling. And it's going to be messy on the way through. It's going to be super messy on the way through. So what I would say is, in any one of the, realize the bet isn't because of you. The bet is when people lose faith in currencies and they get destroyed. So now you don't want to be in one asset class, or how do you create wealth? You concentrate, right? And get lucky.
Right.
That's what an entrepreneur does. It's not 50-50, but as an entrepreneur concentrates all their time into one thing, right? And if they win, they get wealthy.
Right.
What do they do after they win? They diversify.
Right.
How do you protect wealth? You diversify. So if you want to create wealth in this cycle, I don't want to advise what to do.
Yeah, I'm just curious what your mindset is on this. Anyone that's listening,
if you want to create wealth, put a whole bunch of money into Bitcoin, potentially all of it, and get lucky and right. So I think that some should be there, but if you want to create wealth, go all in, right? If you want to protect wealth, put 5% in. Put something in, and then put some into real estate. Have some in cash in case they slow down printing. And if they slow down printing, short everything in the market. The market's going to fall. The market is going to fall by 80%. If governments choose to not protect this,
right,
it's going to collapse everywhere. Right.
I don't see that, right? Like no one's going to have the political will to say like, yo, man, we got to fix this long-term problem now, guys. Let's just to destroy our economies and I'm going to be the politician to fix it. Like no one's going to do that. They're going to keep kicking the can.
Yeah. So exactly. So what is inflation? All it is a hidden tax, right? It's a hidden tax, but it's a hidden tax on the people most unable to pay for it. But governments can't support the services that the population demands, right? By taxing what they should tax. So they create inflation to make their dollars worth less. And so some people win by that construct, some people lose, but government services become way more of the overall market, right? And then the irony of the whole thing is more and more people say we need more government spending, right? And we already know from communism and everything else, central planned societies don't work, right?
Right.
So, and you just create that path. I'll give you another example. We're on Zoom right now. So are many other companies. that probably means that about 50% of the bodies in commercial real estate don't need to be in commercial real estate.
Right.
You see it all over the cities, right? You can work from home, you can just be as almost as productive. And that means if 50% of the bodies don't need to be there, that means commercial real estate must fall by 50%. Fair?
Yeah, that's sure.
About fair, right? Just
Right.
let's use something like that. Why hasn't it? Because of all the stimulation, right? And all the stimulation, all that free money propping up asset prices. And then there are a whole bunch of people that need to pay, entrepreneurs included, that need to pay for our asset prices that are artificially high because government created them artificially high in the first place.
Right.
Used your money, tax money, to be able to do that. And then you have a bunch of entrepreneurs that can't compete to be able to get into start anew because prices are too high. Use an example on real estate, right? Because real estate can't fall in price because we can't let it fall in price. So we start to stimulate it. Rents go up, real estate prices go up. And there's a whole bunch of people that can't afford that need bail. So you bailed out one side of the sector, and then there's a whole bunch of people that can't afford that real estate that you created high in the first place, and you go and give them food stamps, money, everything else to be able to create. Where does that money come from?
Right. So and you talked about this in another talk. We haven't gone there yet, which is this deflationary. Like when you look at the incentives around in venture capital, right? If I go to get venture capital, I go, I got this business. We're going to add tons of employees and bodies and heads. They're like, I don't want to invest in that.
Totally.
They're like, yeah, no thanks, Darius. I'm like, I got this business that requires minimal humans. The productivity per human capital is exponentially higher than it is today, which is basically a fancy way of saying less jobs.
Deflation. Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And they're like, so to your point, you have venture capital doubling, tripling, quadrupling, quintupling down on deflationary behavior. And all of this wealth is being created. And every single company, like if you look at the Dow Jones or the S&P, what's 40%, or I think it's 40% of the companies are losing money. And it's up. Why? Because the 60% that are up for the year are all these tech companies, right?
Look at it even short. Look at the top 5, 10 tech companies. It is the entire weighting. Everything else is down.
Right.
And those are up so much. But that makes sense, right? Because what they're using is technology and network effects to move faster and faster. And as all of the other companies that are competing have to jump on, right? And so the concentration of wealth, because of the policies designed to try to protect the system, they're actually fueling the thing they don't want to work. They don't want. They're creating it to happen faster. If you let deflation happen, I'm going to bypass a whole bunch of it's going to be ugly either way, right? But it's going to be ugly either way. But if you let deflation happen, the broad benefits of technology would be distributed to everyone, and prices would keep falling, right? Economics is not about value. It's about scarcity. The air you're breathing right now is free. Why? Because it's abundant, right? You can't charge for abundant things.
Right.
Why is most of the information you see online free? Why is like abundant technology creates abundance? Abundance moves to free, right? In other words, prices fall, and they keep falling. And while they're still high, entrepreneurs will race in to try to capture more of the incentive of those falling prices. And while there's still a window, how many calculator apps or phone apps or anything else are competed for by entrepreneurs trying to do that? And when they go to free, no more entrepreneurs in that, and they go into the next thing.
Right.
That race to drive prices down lower and lower is actually a good thing for humanity. What it means is the technology could actually do way more of our work, and our most valuable thing, our time,
right,
would be more valuable. Instead, because of the way the system has been set up, we try to work our entire lives, more and more hours, to try to save enough for the last 10 or 15 years of our life so we can do the things we want to do,
right,
and escape those prices rising all the time, right? To have enough to live the last part of our life, when it doesn't need to look like that. It's crazy to think,
Right.
because it changes. It's upside down with the way we grew up. It's upside down with everything we've been taught in economics. It's upside down with everything, but it does not make it not true. It is true.
So this is obviously, like, there's probably people who are like, I don't want to listen to this. This is scaring the shit out of me, right? And so I think, like, what is this? I guess there's two questions I have. Is number one is, what is the solution? Because what I just heard was hyperinflation, which means asset prices are going to go up. People are going to chase that. And then at some point, people are going to lose trust in their governments and their currencies and their debt. And there's going to be like, at some point, you can't keep printing your way. You can't print your way out of this, right? So when's that going to happen?
You can. You can eventually. Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Turkey, like that's what it looks like, right?
Right. $1 billion bills, right?
Yeah.
So,
that's what it looks like, and people believe it can't happen here. It will happen here. It'll happen everywhere. It'll be a domino across different countries going through the same thing.
right. So that's Armageddon is what we're describing. So how do you protect yourself and your families from that? And then secondly, like, can you, and financially, how can people do that, protect themselves? I think you might have touched on that a little bit, but what are the solutions?
So again, unfortunately, when I wrote the book, my hope was governments wouldn't keep doing this, that you would have a reset, that you would take the pain. I say a lot often, there is no light without dark, right? There is no growth without contraction, right? You have to have, that's how an economy works. People bid things up, it gets irrational, and then it has to clear, right? And if you time that right on the clearing, you make a whole bunch of money, and spring comes and you grow again, right? Preventing the clearing, which is happening, only makes the inevitable reset way worse. That's where we are right now. So that reset is coming one way or the other. How do you so then it becomes, how do you personally protect yourself? I said Bitcoin is one way. That's why gold is at an all-time high as well, because people are making bets on what can't, and that's actually why real estate's running away too, right? Because people are making bets on what can't be destroyed in their cash.
Right. So yeah, and I can't remember the book, The Fourth Turning, right, which is kind of talks a little bit about this. So I had a friend someone that came and talked to a Birthing a Giants group that I'm in, Gathering Titans, and they were saying, yeah, hard assets, that's how you protect against some of this stuff. But I guess if it's deflationary, does that really make sense then?
Well, so deflationary is, so if you realize that central banks can control inflation if they want to, or governments can, they can do helicopter money, and they can create deflation or inflation out of thin air, right? So it's, again, the cost to society is tough, right? And what ends up happening when you do that? Let's just look at historical perspective. Let's look at the Weimar Republic, who chose that, right? The rise of Hitler was a direct consequence of that, right? Because what that does is it concentrates wealth in very few people's hands, the asset owners, and then politicians get elected to say, they're the problem. Those asset owners, they took your money,
right?
And that's how revolutions start. So who were the asset owners in the Weimar Republic?
I'm going to assume the Jews.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what does that look like? And they were the business owners, and everything else were and so what it looks like is a different redistribution of wealth, and people buy it every time, right? And I bet you there's people listening to this podcast right now that are on one side or the other, Democrat or Republican, and so entrenched in that point of view that they can't see the forest for the trees, that it's neither side. Those are perfectly predictable consequences of what we're talking about. People aren't deep enough to look at what's happening. Both won't work, right?
Yeah,
the MMT socialism won't work. Neither will capitalism as it currently is designed, because capitalism as it's currently designed looks nothing like capitalism. It looks like cronyism.
We have a question that came from the audience. What are your thoughts behind the idea of more people joining the off-the-grid movement as a solution to help bring balance?
So the off-the-grid movement is actually a function of what we're talking about in technology too, right? You never used to be able to do it, right? Or is it now with solar moving in price down and everything else? There's a whole bunch of things, and the technology under growing conditions and farming and everything else. The off-grid movement is becoming easier and easier to do because of where technology is today, and that's what's happening. That's what's happening in Bitcoin too, right? So you have a whole bunch of people that realize that the current monetary system of the world is on its last legs, and they're choosing a new system.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't look at it as good and bad people. I think that's too easy, and I look at it as this through a business lens. Why didn't Kodak create? They created the digital camera.
Right.
Why did they benefit from it? Right? Why did they parking lot it over and over? And it's because the existing frame of mind won't allow the innovation, right?
Right.
And so that innovation is found by entrepreneurs or a new market. It's very rarely the existing company that does what they need to do to see the new. Or look at Blockbuster versus Netflix, right? Blockbuster adds candy aisles to their stores, right? Thinking that that's going to protect them against digital download speeds increasing, and their entire business model is at risk in a nanosecond, and they can't. And it's too late once download speeds go to a certain thing, but they didn't see it. And it's not bad executives. It's not bad everything else. It's just you're so caught in an existing system. You're trying to protect the existing system at all costs. So if I look at all sides, Republican, Democrats, all the people that are in this existing system, and subsequently all of us, because we are too, right? That's what the existing system looks like. And Bitcoin is a separate system that cannot that doesn't work. So that's actually one of the reasons why it's designed in a way on a network effect that over time I have a high degree of confidence it's going to be either a reserve currency that other currencies are forced to adopt.
Yeah, I had a friend that was talking about how you'll see they were talking about a digital currency come, like that will be controlled by government, right?
But let's go into that. Why do they want to control? I wrote about this in the book too. So there's an IMF working paper that had a lot of traction that said we have to have interest at the next crisis. Interest rates need to go to -6%. So imagine putting your money in the bank and getting -6% interest rate.
Wow.
Hard to fathom. But again, with what we're talking about, it has to go there. But the problem is, without digital currencies, you would take the money out of the bank, you put it under your mattress. Why interest rates can't go too far negative is because they become bank runs and everybody takes their currency back. And what is a currency? It's just a trust and exchange rate. It's a trust, right? You and I do trade. We need to trust that the underlying unit is the same. So if every government is manipulating the underlying unit, what happens is we trust something else.
Right.
I suspect we're not, I understand why governments are racing to do digital currencies so they can control more people on the digital currencies, but that won't solve this.
Yeah, so the thought process is it needs to be an unbiased third party currency, essentially.
Exactly.
Interesting. What's for lunch?
You want to go back into karaoke?
Yeah, I felt way better when I was singing karaoke than I do right now. Man, this is some scary stuff. So obviously, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. But like any.
Well, so that's actually why I said. So the title of the book, "The Price of Tomorrow: Why Deflation Is the Key to an Abundant Future." Have people look deeper. Read the book. It's not a bad thing, right? It's actually the best thing for humanity. The best thing for humanity, because we could actually get way more of our time if prices were free, if prices came down for free everywhere, or close to free everywhere, we wouldn't need the same amount of work to protect it. And those jobs are coming away anyways. The only thing that we're is, when I said we're all caught in that system, our minds have been wired to this is the way it works. And that's really hard to accept what I'm saying, right? But if you go through the book, and if you go through and try to debate anything, try to pull out where it's wrong, right? I've gone to research lengths and to make it readable, really easy to read, to say this is happening, and it's a good thing. It's a really good thing for humanity. It's a fantastic thing for humanity. Stopping that from happening is the worst thing for humanity.
Interesting. I have to assume academics are debating or pushing back on you on this, or, are you getting any pushback and if you are, like, what type of pushback?
That is super interesting. So you imagine how well this is followed. It's been a bestseller and everything else. And yeah, you'll get the occasional mad tweet or comment on Amazon and everything else. But for the people that are actually opening their mind to this, and nobody has given, not one person has given a reason why this isn't true. Not one, right? I'm looking for it. I'm looking to have that debate. In fact, there's somebody on Twitter that recently said, kind of out of some of these things are posted on my feed, 5,000 times, and retweeted it around. One person that was, after reading the book, was originally kind of more hesitant, right? It would come. He posted something recently that said, I haven't seen one argument against what Jeff is hypothesizing here. Not one that holds any water in what Jeff is hypothesizing here. And so yeah, you're going to get something as radical as what I'm talking about. You're going to get people throwing stones. But if you actually go down this rabbit hole, it's really hard to unsee.
Yeah, my brain's in the rabbit hole right now. You're like blowing my brain up. I'm like, oh, I gotta get your book. I gotta read this. Wow. So, Jeff, what a great talk. This has been so informative, and I'm so grateful to be able to spend time with you to learn about this and for you to get this message out there. And I guess the hopes are that the right people and the right governments are listening to this and making the move. But if it's systemic and it's crossing all these boundaries, is it something that would need to happen across everyone has? It's global.
Yeah. And so that's why it's unlikely that it'll happen at that level. What will happen is there's a bunch of new, just like a business gets destroyed because it can't see what's coming, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's more likely that the next leaders of governments take it more seriously. The younger people look into this and start to advance this. It's very unlikely that the existing powers that be have any. There's no incentive to do it,
right?
And it's really hard politically to do. So it's more likely younger generation.
Well, thank you so much for the time today. This is so informative. The book, where can they find the book? Is it Amazon?
Amazon's probably best. Yeah.
Yeah. So The Price of Tomorrow: Why Deflation Is the Key to an Abundant Future. You guys can get on Amazon's best-selling author, Jeff Booth, here sharing the book with us. What a treat. Really appreciate this so much. And thank you for spending the time with us.
No problem at all. It's been great.
All right, guys. We'll see you guys later on today. We got a show this evening.